হ্যালো এভরিওয়ান, আসসালামু আলাইকুম সবাই। ব্রেইন বিডি আমাদের প্রথম রাউন্ড টেবল কনভারসেশন, even though we are not sitting around a table, but it's a conversation. My name is Jyoti, and we've got Shafiq and Zafar Sobhan. Zafar is the editor of Dhaka Tribune, and Shafiq is a political science academic based in Canada. আর আমি জ্যোতি, economist based in Australia. আমরা আজকে কথা বলবো implication of the US elections for Bangladesh. So ট্রাম্প নির্বাচনে জিতেছেন, he's the president-elect, and there's going to be fallout, unquestionably. But we're going to have an in-depth conversation around what some of those implications for Bangladesh might be. এটার কিছু কিছু জিনিস আমরা শুনেছি বিভিন্ন sort of in various influencers have talked about it, various talking heads in talk shows and so on. So some of these things you would have heard, others maybe not, maybe you would take a longer term perspective. Let's see how we go. Shafiq, you want to start?
হ্যাঁ, হ্যাঁ, থ্যাংক ইউ জ্যোতি। আসসালামু আলাইকুম সবাইকে। আম, তা জাফর, প্রথমেই শুরু করি। ইলেকশনের পরে কি হলো? আমরা দেখছি যে মানে দেশের ভিতরে এবং দেশের বাইরে সবখানে বিশেষ করে আওয়ামী লীগের সমর্থকেরা, নেতারা সবাই অত্যন্ত আনন্দিত, মানে একদম ডেলিরিয়াসলি হ্যাপি। যে মানে শেখ হাসিনা যে সেই বিখ্যাত একটা ফোন কনভারসেশন ফাঁস হয়েছে, ওটা তো বটেই। এমনকি ফেসবুকে হতে শুরু করে মানে সবখানে দেখছি তারা একটা নতুন কনফিডেন্স পেয়েছে, এবং মানে ইট সিমস লাইক দে গট দেয়ার বিগেস্ট ব্রেক আফটার 5th অগস্ট, লাইক 3 মাস পরে। এবং তারা নতুন কনফিডেন্স। সো এবং দেশের ভিতরে তো সমর্থকরা তো আছেই। তো আমার প্রশ্ন হলো এটা, যে আওয়ামী লীগের সমর্থকদের এত খুশি হওয়ার, এত হ্যাপি হওয়ার কি যথেষ্ট কারণ আছে, নাকি তারা এমনি এমনি খুশি হচ্ছে? আমার, হোয়াট ডু ইউ থিঙ্ক?
Um, Thank you for that question. আমি শুরু করি বলি that we've been here before. এটা কিন্তু আগে হয়েছিল 2016 সালে। 2016 সাল was a very different time because at that time, honestly, if I remember correctly, আসলে কেউ মনে করে না যে ট্রাম্প জিতবে। Everyone was assuming that there was going to be a Hillary Clinton presidency, and also people, আমাদের মতো মানুষ যারা were reading the political tea leaves, they were also thinking that this is going to have a big impact on Bangladeshi politics, in that there's no love lost between Hillary Clinton and Sheikh Hasina, who is the PM at the time. And so that was a real shock, and people were bracing for Hillary to come to power, and what would it all mean? So now, this time, it's less of a shock, because I think the polls were showing, and we've also seen the experience of 8 years ago, that it was really neck and neck, and they have the shy Trump voters. Many people were thinking that it was quite likely that Trump would come to power. And the impact on Bangladesh has, in fact, been something which we have been discussing here in Bangladesh actually since August 8th. তখন থেকেই কিন্তু লোক বলছে যে we have to wait and see what happens on the election, in the US. ওটা না হওয়া পর্যন্ত we can't really understand which direction Bangladesh will be going, and it was waiting for the other shoe to drop. অনেকেই বলছিল that why is Professor Yunus not asserting himself more? এই করছে না কেন, ওই করছে না কেন? You've heard these critiques, and then other people said the reason he's not asserting himself is he's waiting for the election. Once Kamala gets elected, then he will get the green light and he will start to assert himself. And ওটা না হওয়া পর্যন্ত he's holding back because he doesn't really know what the situation will hold for him. And then now, of course, we understand that Trump will come. So now the question is, what does this mean? And is it really that good for the Awami League? And is it really that bad for the interim government? I think John Danilowitz, who is perhaps well known to the two of you, wrote a piece in Dhaka Tribune, which we published just a few days ago, where he said that, look, he thinks that the people thinking that the impact on Bangladeshi politics is going to be so great have been overstating the case to some extent. And I think there is some truth to this. I also spoke to someone in the interim government recently, and they said, look, it's true that this is going to have an impact, but they have received so much support from so many other foreign governments So basically America, Badi, India, Badi, every other foreign government from, China for that matter, to Japan, to the EU, to the UK, consistently and has, and has consistently provided this support and uh, have made statements of support both privately and publicly. So they're not too worried about it. I think, and this is a point John made in his article in Dhaka Tribune, is that the impact in Bangladesh is more sort of psychological than anything else. And so then it remains to be seen whether this will actually have any real impact. But if we're talking about things which have a psychological impact, we should look at the events of yesterday, which was Nur Hussain Day here in Bangladesh. And there's a lot of apprehension that the Awami League, they were sending out a lot of these messages to their workers and their supporters to congregate at 0 point. And And again, Bangladesh, I wish this was not politics in Bangladesh. I wish that politics in Bangladesh was more civil and civilized, and it wasn't to do with the show of strength on the streets. It wasn't to do with what kind of a show you can put on, and who beats who up. We all hope, but the reality is that is a big part of politics in Bangladesh, and this is also shows the average Bangladeshi person where the balance of power lies. So the fact that the Awami were not able to muster any strength on the streets at all is, I think, that is probably more significant in terms of how people inside the country are viewing things than it is than Trump being elected. Now, what is the upshot of Trump's election likely to be in Bangladesh? Probably it will be that he himself will have very little of a Bangladesh policy. I dare say he would not be able to pick out Bangladesh on a map, and I don't think it would be a strong priority of his, though you never know. He could surprise us, things could change. But what it does mean is that India will be more, he is likely to revert back to America's previous policy of essentially subcontracting Bangladesh matters out to India. And that is, of course, something which we are all concerned about here in Bangladesh, because we feel that it's very clear that the Modi government is a strong supporter of the ousted regime. And we've also seen coordinated efforts from both the Modi government and the establishment media and the political establishment in India to both denigrate the interim government, and quite frankly, it certainly appears to destabilize the situation here in Bangladesh, is what it certainly appears to the casual observer. Now, they will certainly, they will have more of an open field in which to operate. But whether that will be dispositive and whether they will be able to use that advantage to necessarily change the game here in Bangladesh, I wonder, because I think at the end of the day, America's role is important, India's role is important, but the main thing is what's happening here inside Bangladesh. And if the Awami League is not able to muster that kind of support at the ground level, which certainly for the foreseeable future, I think will remain the case, it doesn't matter what India does, it doesn't matter what America does. It's the game is being played here. And I think India is also getting a little bit smart about this, so and we can talk about that more. I think they're finally getting their intelligence together, and they're understanding that, look, backing the Hasina government to the hilt, which is what they did up until August 5th and maybe afterwards, is possibly not a winning strategy for them. I'll leave it there for now, and we can sort of talk more about these issues.
Shafiq, you want to go, or I have a few things
You
that
have
I
follow up, I'm sure. Yeah, we can discuss. Yeah.
No, okay. Jyoti, go ahead. I'm for a follow up.
Acha, okay. So three things that come immediately from all of that you said, Zafar. And so I'll put them out there, and then either of you jump in, okay? And in no particular order. So you finished on the India, so let's go with that. So I noticed that you have written a lot since 5th August about, so one article was 10 things Indians need to know about Bangladesh. And other ones, both Dhaka Tribune, but Indian outlet, right? Just setting the record straight.
Yeah.
So, what do you think the Indian game plan here is? Because as you said, they're not, if Awami League is not able to hold on to the streets, then yeah, like sort of you destabilize Bangladesh, you make the Yunus government flop or fail, and then so
Yeah.
then what happens after that? So
Sure.
that's one question, all right? Because it's not clear to me that yeah, that sort of there is any obvious sort of day after that India has in mind. Um, the flip side of that from our side or from Bangladesh side is that what is our game plan? And by that
Yeah.
I don't mean just the government, obviously administration, foreign, sort of foreign advisor and so on, they have to have their game plan. But I mean more broadly, we as the civil society, um, various political parties that you are observing, BNP and others, sort of what's the what do you think is shaping up to be the sort of the India strategy post Hasina Bangladesh? So that is
Sure.
one element of
Yeah.
conversation. A completely different one is uh, so we talked about the Awami Leaguers being happy about Trump. But Trump also has a particular, so and you said that Bangladesh politics is unfortunately sort of people controlling the streets and so on. I mean, in light of Trump's election, sort of the West is not really all that better, right? I mean, his whole shtick is that look, I alone can own the libs and lock them up and deport 10 million illegals and whatnot, right? So this is all this bravado, macho politics. And it's not just Trump, like, strong men are winning everywhere. Strong men
Yeah.
and women, right? I mean,
Yeah.
sort of in Italy, in France, right? I mean, we just got rid of our strong woman, right?
Yeah.
But like, sort of, and then she didn't win an election, sort of.
Yeah.
So there's that too. However, right, in post Hasina Bangladesh, do you think that sort of that kind of Trump style politics? I mean, like, I could think of at least one individual who'd fit that bill, but maybe I'll just stop there. So একটা হচ্ছে India
Okay.
strategy আর একটা হচ্ছে যে okay, so sort of
Sure.
this style of
Well, no, I
politics,
mean,
yeah.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. There's sort of
Yes.
three different things.
Yeah.
But let me start at the start to get a volatility. Initially, I think India's game plan was probably that they very much hoped that they could reverse what happened on August 5th. Or, they've invested a great deal in the Awami League and Sheikh Hasina's leadership. And, they've really spent the last 15 years establishing themselves in Bangladesh through this network. But my sense is that fairly rapidly, they have come to the conclusion that এটা হবে, that this is a losing strategy. And you can even see some evidence of this. Recently, they released a statement saying we consider Sheikh Hasina to be the former prime minister of Bangladesh. Right. They're not putting out that she is still the prime minister. If they wanted to create it, they could make that argument. You could say, well, যেটা হয়েছিল August 5th and তারপর থেকে on a constitutional basis নাই. You could make the argument if they wanted to. So the fact they retreated from that position, in fact, this is the position which Soji Wazir Joy is making. I've seen him make it on his Facebook page. So the fact that the Indian government is not saying that, I think, is significant. Right. Now, so what is their game plan and what do they want to see? This is interesting because for the last 15 years, in my dealings with people in the high levels of Indian government and in the diplomatic circles, what I've learned and what I've seen, and I'm sure the two of you will also understand, there was a massive allergy towards the BNP. Yeah, this is what was really behind their strong support of Awami League. And I think that allergy has to do with what they saw from 2001 to 2006, support for Ulfa separatists and various other various other evidence they took that the BNP was not at all had that their security concerns were not being taken.
Yeah.
This was for them. This was absolutely a non-negotiable red line which the BNP had crossed. And I'll even quote I'm not going to name the name, but this gentleman worked in has served in Bangladesh in a diplomatic capacity, and now is a very, very senior diplomat in the Indian foreign policy firmament, and has also held very senior roles elsewhere. He said to me, and I quote, this is a direct quote, he said that you have to understand, Zafar, that if we have anything to do with it, and we do, BNP under Tariq Rahman will never come to power in Bangladesh again.
Right.
This is a quote made about 10 years ago, 2014. I can't remember the exact date. So it's a very clear statement of intent and where they stood on that. Now, I think things have changed. I think interestingly, the specific fear they have of the current situation is they seem to have very, very little faith and belief in the interim government and Professor Yunus. I think they are very specifically concerned with the students, and they feel that this current situation, in fact, is rife with danger for the rise of Islamist elements in Bangladesh, and that is their primary concern. As a result of which, they have had, my understanding is that they've had a completely re-evaluation of their position vis-a-vis the BNP. My understanding is there have been many high-level meetings between BNP in India, and they have now made their peace. They're looking at the Bangladeshi political firmament, and they believe that out of all of the possibilities which are out there, the best one for us is if the BNP were to come to power, which is an absolute night and day difference from what they thought 3.5 months ago. But it's, right. I think this is where the current situation has led them. And they feel that, for the stability they want, they'd much rather deal with the BNP than they would rather deal with the interim government. And they also feel that the BNP will be able to provide that stability so they don't have to worry about the rise of more right-wing Islamist elements. So that is their game plan, I believe, is so they are pushing all of their weight behind forcing, or not forcing, or encouraging elections in Bangladesh. And that's fair enough. Say that this current situation is too unstable, it's something they're not comfortable with. And we do see evidence of this instability all over. So it's not a position which is entirely without foundation. And, there is a certain lack of clarity in terms of what's going on in who's running things. Certainly the potential for things to spiral down do exist, of course, whenever you have non-elected government, that is.
If nothing else, the non-elected government or elected government being headed by an 84-year-old man introduces complexities of its own, right?
And this particular one, I wouldn't say his age is necessarily the factor, but the very fact is that, you have several power centers in Bangladesh. Yeah. Of course, Professor Yunus is one, but, General Waqar is another. The political parties are another. The Islamist political parties, as opposed to the BNP, are another. The students, both inside the government and outside the government, and there are many centers of power. So, of course, things are going to be a little bit unstable. That's understandable. Now, what is our...
I just need to stop you there and just ask a provocative question, right?
Sure.
And Shafiq, let's see, what you think is...
So
you just mentioned various centers of power, and 5th of August could not have happened without the general in question, right? And his his TV address has to be one of the most unusual generals in those kind of situations. He did not say, I'm assuming power. He said, আমি সবকিছুর দায়িত্ব নিচ্ছি, I'm taking responsibility.
That's true.
If I were the South Bloc, why would I not talk to him instead of BNP?
I think they are talking. him as well. Okay, my understanding is that he is a person they are comfortable with, and that is also an option for them. So, they don't like the current status quo, but they could also very much live with some kind of military government. But the fact of the matter is, any military government in Bangladesh or anywhere else in the world is, by the nature of the beast, short-lived. This is not a long-term solution. It cannot be a long-term solution. It can, at best, be a short-term bandage for them. You see,
And
so
then we are back dealing with BNP or Islam.
Okay, so come what may, you have to gure fire. You're going to end up
right.
This, and this is, of course, this was exactly the calculus they had to make back in 2007.
Yeah.
And not just them, but many other people as well. They had high hopes, for the caretaker government, and then maybe they thought that initially people thought that maybe Professor Yunus would be the way forward, and then when he dropped out, then they thought, well, let's see what General Moin can do. But they finally figured out that the only real game in town is elections, and the people who are likely to win elections are going to be the Awami League. In that year, in the year 2008, that seemed to be, and it took a long time for them to come to that realization, but eventually they did. So I think it's a similar thing, but in reverse. And I think the beneficiaries this time would be the BNP, because I think most of us agree that if there were to be a free and fair election in Bangladesh today, or in 3 months, or in 6 months, or a year, we certainly see the BNP winning that election. I think that's general. I would like to see some polling done on this, legitimate polling, but there has been polling done in past times, and most of the people I know who are on the ground and talking to people out, this is the general consensus, which I think is true. But not talking about our game plan. So already what we're seeing, it's very interesting. I'm not going to divide. Now, and I want to come back. In India, there are two things going on. At all of there's a lot of anger and resentment and hostility towards India in Bangladesh. Not just, this has been building up for a long time. And I would say, as a result of their support of the Awami League government, as a result of, BJP being in power for the last decade, and, the fact that anti-Muslim rhetoric and actions and anti-Bangladeshi rhetoric and actions are really a cornerstone of their ruling philosophy. This is to be expected. And of course, after what happened in July and August, and the notion that, that they are really the supporters and sponsors of the Hasina regime, this is, I would suggest that it seems to me that the public perception of India in Bangladesh is probably the lowest it's ever been. I'll tell you something very interesting. I mean, 10 things Bangladesh, India needs to know about Bangladesh. So that went quite viral. Many people talked about it. And my 9 points, the first 9 points were basically talking about the missteps India made. Now, my 10th point was, I said, be all of the above as it may, we still would like to be friends. We understand that Bangladesh from India, it doesn't serve anyone's purpose. On social media, all of the commentary was, all of it, and I'm not talking most of it, I'm talking all of it. They said they really love the piece. আপনার প্রথম 9টা পয়েন্টের সাথে আমরা একমত, কিন্তু আপনার 10ম পয়েন্ট আমরা পছন্দ করি না, আমরা মানি না, আমরা ওটার সাথে একমত নই. Everyone said the same thing. So when I talk to my Indian friends, I'm saying, a lot of them were a little upset by the piece, and they thought it was quite hard hitting. I said, believe me, when I tell you that the piece I wrote, I am the moderate voice. I am the pro-India voice in Bangladesh. Right. You're not going to get any better than this. Many, if not most, Bangladeshis are far to the right when it comes to India. So if you have to understand. Okay. Now, what does this mean? What does this mean in a practical matter for Bangladesh? Here's the point. At the end of the day, India has a 4,000-kilometer border. At the end of the day, there are a rising world power. At the end of the day, they have a massive influence in Bangladesh, both economically and elsewhere. at the end of the day, we are extraordinarily important to India from a strategic perspective because of our rather unique geography, which is surrounded by India's geographic size. I would make the argument, and I've actually seen this made, below the lines. In some ways, Bangladesh is more important to India than parts of India are to India. Simply because if they lose Bangladesh, they lose the Northeast. And this is something which they cannot risk. So we have to be also practical in the matter. So while this hostility does exist, and I've already noticed you have certain people, the BNP, certain people in the interim government making very conciliatory noises because they understand that, look, however it might be, at the end of the day, we cannot afford to have a negative relationship with them. Now, there are some political forces who've taken that anti-Indianism and have decided that we are going to run with that ball because they see that it's a massive winner with the public. That's certainly where public sentiment is. And the question for Bangladesh, the voters in Bangladesh, is which of these two visions are we going to follow? And I think it's different from the Awami League. The Awami League had a very openly pro-Indian stance, which I think in the context of Bangladesh today, there's no space for that kind of politics. That would not be a vote winner. But the question is, yes, yes, we have our reservations about India, but do you still think that we need to do business with India and try and have friendly relationships with India, that friendship tempered by our knowledge of what and who India is, and Vishesh Kore the BJP government, or you want to have a much more conflictual, confrontational relationship with India. And that's the decision which I think Bangladeshi voters will have to make. So I think those are the two positions. And you already see certain political parties and certain political players staking out the more right-wing anti-Indian position. And I think that's a decision for Bangladeshi voters. They have to decide, in a sense, are you going to vote with your heart or are you going to vote with your head? Perhaps a lot of Bangladeshis, if they're going to vote with their heart, they would agree with that position. But if they're going to vote with their head, they'll say, well, even if we might agree on a fundamental philosophical level, just being practical, let's leaven this hostility and we all have to learn to live with one another. So that's the second part of your question. The third part of your question is in terms of the strong man or strong woman, as the case may be. I mean, I'll be blunt. I mean, the truth of the matter is, forget about the rest of the world. Bangladesh kotha jodi boli, I don't think Bangladeshis have ever been strong believers in democracy, to be honest. And we've never had any leader or any political party who strongly believes in democracy. Democracy being defined as you believe that the voters should have the final say, and that if you lose, you should. Every political party, BNP, Army League, they all want to rule this country. And they think that they would much rather a situation where they rule the country for the next 100 years rather than it went back and forth between other political parties. And they've taken steps in that direction. And frankly, I think this is also part of the Bangladeshi national character. I don't think Bangladeshis, for the most part, really believe in democracy. They want their side to win. But the true belief in democracy means, are you willing to accept a situation where the other side wins? And I don't know too many Bangladeshis, when push comes to shove, who actually believe that. So in a sense, I feel like the rest of the world is now, the direction it's moving is moving in the direction in which Bangladesh always was. And maybe this is not just Bangladesh, maybe this is something to do with the developing world. But I really feel that we are moving away from democracy as a way to arrange our political affairs in the world. And so it's since this end of the Second World War, and I think you've also written about this, and though I think you and I perhaps might disagree on this, that democracy had a good run, but I'm not sure that in the 21st century democracy will. I see it in retreat everywhere. And it's in retreat in places where it was powerful as a force, and in places where it was still being developed. I think, given the global trends, it's not going to establish itself. I mean, it would be very strange and unusual if democracy would strongly take hold in Asia, in a place like Bangladesh, at exactly the time it's in retreat in America and Western Europe. That would be my assessment. And
Very depressing thought. Very depressing thought. But go on.
again, it depends what you mean again by democracy. See, but I think most Bangladeshis are very happy with the notion of a strong man or a strong woman running things for them. Of course, that said, I would say that the golden era of Bangladesh post-independence has been from 91 to 2001, when we did have the strongest democracy. That's my own personal feeling. And I feel that it was good for a number of reasons. Economic growth may have been slower than it was in subsequent years, but I feel that the benefits of that time period, where you had government changing hands relatively, and you had things from the BNP to the BNP again, and what that did for the quality of life in Bangladesh and the quality of people living in civil society and freedom of the press and freedom of speech and all of these other things, it was worth it. But in subsequent years, we got stronger economic growth until recently, but then we suffered as well in other ways. But I'm not sure everyone would agree with that. That's my sense.
Shafiq, you go. No, very
না
thought-provoking. I'll come back, but maybe we hear from Shafiq first.
না ডেমোক্রেসি রিট্রিট নিয়ে না অফকোর্স এটা তো গ্লোবাল একটা ট্রেন্ড আছে বাট এট দ্য সেম টাইম আই এম নট দ্যাট পেসিমিস্টিক বিকজ মানে অন্য জিনিসগুলো অত সাস্টেনেবল না ইয়া এটা রিট্রিট হচ্ছে কিন্তু দেখো এদিকে কান্ট্রিজ লাইক মালয়েশিয়া ইন্দোনেশিয়া ভেরি বিগ কান্ট্রিজ ইন্দোনেশিয়া ওয়ার্ল্ড লার্জেস্ট মুসলিম কান্ট্রি তো তারা তো এখানে মোটামুটি ইলেকশন হচ্ছে যত যাই বলুক না কেন ইলেকশন গভর্নমেন্ট চেঞ্জ হচ্ছে একটা থেকে আরেকটা গভর্নমেন্ট হচ্ছে মালয়েশিয়াতেও মোটামুটি একটা প্রসেস ইয়ে হয়েছে আরো মানে বিকজ চার্চিল যেমন বলেছিল যে ডেমোক্রেসি ইজ আ ওয়ার্স সিস্টেম বাট লাইক there's
Except for the
something that
others.
Except
nothing is
for all
better.
the others.
I mean,
Yeah.
It's the worst way of running a country, except for all the others.
except
Yeah.
for all the others. Well, people will other সিস্টেমে যাবে আর যে তারপরে আর বিশেষ করে আমাদের বুঝতে হবে যে ওয়ার্ল্ড এখন পুরো ওয়ার্ল্ড একটা প্রচন্ড বিশাল একটা সোশ্যাল এবং ডেমোগ্রাফিক চেঞ্জের মধ্যে যাচ্ছে মানে এই ট্রেন্ড গুলা যে এত র্যাপিডলি এক্সেলারেটিং মানে জাস্ট এই ডেমোগ্রাফিক কোলাপস যে পরিবারের ইয়ে হচ্ছে তারপর আবার এই ইমিগ্রেশনের ফলে ইয়ে চেঞ্জ বাট এভরিবডি ইজ পিপল ফেসিং আইডেন্টি ক্রাইসিস লাইক এই জন্য ওয়েস্টে এটা পার্টিকুলারলি বলবো না যে ওয়েস্টার্ন পিপলরা স্ট্রং ম্যান কে চায় বাট দে আর লাইক এভরিবডি ইজ অ্যাফ্রেড নোবডি ইজ ফিলিং সিকিউর লাইক দ্য প্রিভিয়াসলি যে 70s 60s বা 70s 80s এর মতো যে লাইফ যেটা মানুষ যেরকম দেখতো যে ট্র্যাডিশনাল লাইফ বাবা দাদাদের সাথে যে কানেকশন আচ্ছা ঠিক আছে এগুলো খুব এসোটারিক আলাপ হচ্ছে লেটস ব্রিং ব্যাক দ্য টক টু আওয়ার ইলেকশন এবং আদার থিং একটা সিম্পল বাট রুড অবজারভেশন যেটা হলো যে যদিও বলতে হয় যে ডোন্ট ক্রাই ওভার স্পয়েলড মিল্ক স্পিল্ড মিল্ক আর কি যে হ্যাঁ ঠিক আছে এটা হয়তো ইলেকশনটার ফলে মানে এই ট্রাম্প আসাতে মানে খুব একটা ক্ষতি হবে না বাংলাদেশের কিন্তু যেই লাভটা হতো মানে আমরা তো যখন প্রফেসর ইউনুসকে যখন ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্ট করা হলো তখন সবাই একদিক দিয়ে হলো যে উই গট এ পার্সন হু হ্যাজ গট ডাইরেক্ট অ্যাক্সেস টু ওবামা ক্লিন্টন হু ক্যান জাস্ট কল দেম এন্ড দে উইল পিক আপ দ্য ফোন মানে এবং পার্টিকুলার ইউএস এস্টাবলিশ এই যে স্ট্রং কানেকশনটা এটা তো মানে বছরে $100 মিলিয়ন লবিং দিয়েও এটা পাওয়া যায় না এই অ্যাক্সেসটা তাই না দ্যাট ওয়াজ দেয়ার এবং প্রফেসর ইউনুস যে প্রথম কয়েক মাসে ইন্ডিয়ার বিরুদ্ধে যে স্ট্রংলি কিছু কথাবার্তা বলেছিল এগুলোর মধ্যে একটা ছিল যে আই হ্যাভ এ বিগার ফ্রেন্ড তাই না এরকম একটা ইয়ে ছিল একটা যে তো এখন আমার কথা হলো যে দ্যাট প্ল্যাঙ্ক ইজ গন অ্যান্ড লাইক সুতরাং মানে it must be like a shock to them like I don't know they of course anticipated যে এরকম কিছুটা হতে পারে but you have a big friend in power but then he's of course he's still there but he will not be there in a few months so এটা তো অবশ্যই একটা সাইকোলজিক্যাল ইম্প্যাক্ট হতে পারে সুতরাং what do you think এটা এই ইন্টারিম গভর্নমেন্টের মানে সাবসিকুয়েন্ট ফিউ 6 মান্থ 7 মান্থের ডিউরেশন বা কার্যক্রম বা প্ল্যানিং এর মধ্যে কি এফেক্ট ফেলবে? উড দে থিঙ্ক দ্যাট লাইক we are too we don't have many friends, we shouldn't be so adventurous, let's play safe or something like that? What
Yeah,
do
I
you think?
mean,
What does that mean
no,
for election timing?
no, I think that's really the fundamental question. I think the ঠিক বলেছিলেন, there's an opportunity cost here. I know that's the word, but yeah, what could have been, you know,
Yeah.
and we've lost a great asset, and it's not just an asset for the interim government, but it's an asset for Bangladesh, because I'm on a কিছু expect করতে পারতাম যদিও he's still America হয়তো বা is not there, but he still commands this great deal of respect on the international stage. So Shadike, he can still perhaps work some of his magic in favor of the interim government and also in favor of Bangladesh. My sense is, again, there are two things. It has occurred to me. একটা হলো এটা কিন্তু যে পুরোপুরি যে negative ভাবে তা না. It may also, because of course the third plank of our foreign policy imperatives, which we haven't discussed yet. We talk about America, we talk about India. We should also be talking about China. And I think one of the things, certainly with Biden and Kamala Harris's foreign policy, would be to pressure Professor Yunus into taking a much more confrontational stance with China, not an equidistant stance, not trying to also play them off as well or keep good terms with them. So pressure it's going to be lifted from him. And maybe that could be to Bangladesh's advantage, because of course, I think Bangladesh ideally should have good relations with America, but should have good relations with China too. So maybe this will in fact paradoxically give him more flexibility, in determining the foreign policy of Bangladesh, which may not be any bad thing. My sense is, in the medium to long term, I would anticipate that this will, but again, we're talking about counterfactual, so it's hard to say, but because we would never know what would have happened in the alternative. But my sense is that we'll probably now, it'll be a factor in whether elections happen sooner rather than later. If you ask me to put a estimate on when we're likely to see elections, I want to by the end of next year. And now it could have been that if Kamala Harris had come to power, it would still have been the end of next year, because I think at the end of the day, that decision is going to be made based on what are the objective situation on the ground in Bangladesh. আসলে economy কিভাবে run করছে, law and order situation then if that's under control, they will get more breathing space from the general public to take more time. If that continues to be a challenge, if that continues to be a struggle, that will incline them to have elections a little bit earlier. So I think in the end, it may not have that much of an impact, but I mean, it's hard to say. But I guess from a psychological level, I think if you asked me 1 week ago, in assuming a Kamala Harris presidency, I would say, আমি মনে করি যে 1 বছরের মধ্যে নির্বাচন হবে এবং আরো বা 6 মাস সময় মানে লাগতে পারে. Now, I would slightly temper that and say, আমি মনে করি by the end of 2025, actually এটা হবে. So not too much of a difference, but something of a difference.
It's remarkable how much we have come from the world where, we would never accept a government led by Tariq Rahman to one where, sort of he's the least bad of our options. How much we have come in India, right? And also, although there is no poll as such, but sort of expectations are that an election is going to be won by BNP if it's held in next sort of 12 months and so. But BNP আসলেও, or whoever forms the government. So firstly, you mentioned China, so that's actually interesting, because one implication of Trump is that US is retreating from the world, right? I mean, he won in 2016. You could put that down for an aberration. 2020, you could say that, hey, look, COVID and Black Lives Matters and all of these things. 2024, this is the third election where he mattered, and he has become stronger every election, right? It seems that the sort of US domestic politics, there is no constituency anymore for being the global hegemon, right? They probably could retreat behind Fortress America and still be, the world's richest country, world's strongest country, and so on. But, sort of in the word of Rick Blaine from Casablanca, right? That foreign policy of not sticking my neck out for nobody. So if we end up in that kind of world where America has retreated and sort of the globalized era has retreated, so we have been a country that has benefited from globalization through exports of garments, obviously, and also emigration and remittance, right? So a world where they don't buy stuff from poor countries, a world where our migrants are shut out. What does that mean for a country like Bangladesh? Stuck between India and China, two large countries with their own historical, geopolitical ambitions and issues. Long-term question to both of you.
I think there's a lot of confused thinking, both inside America and outside America, as to what they actually really want. Although they don't want to spend money and they don't want to be the world's star, but they also, I think Americans very much like being the big player. They would not like to see China rise and take their position in the world. So it's kind of like how people, everyone wants social services, no one wishes to pay taxes.
Right.
You see? So on the one hand, they don't want to fund expensive foreign wars, but they don't at all. I think America is not at all prepared to retreat from its position is the major power in the world. And someone like Trump, he may not want to spend money in Ukraine either, but it's not as though he would be very happy with China taking over from America as the primary power in the world. I mean, that wouldn't sit well with his ego, that wouldn't sit well with his worldview. You see? So I think the situation is more complex. And I think one of the things you'll see Trump do, and I think it's not so much that he's going to retreat from America's global role, is he's going to try and rewrite the rules. So what he's going to say is that, why are we underwriting all of NATO's expenses? Okay, why are we providing all of this security? It's very transactional. What do we get in return? So he's not saying that I think the Ukraine war is a bad idea. He's saying, why should we fund it? Where's Western Europe? Why don't you guys step up? It's on your border. You are the ones who stand to lose the most from this. Frankly, আমার কিছু যায় আসে না whether Russia takes over Ukraine or not. What the hell do I care? What the hell does America care? You're the ones who are making such a howcow about it. So if you care so much, you pay for it. Why should I pay for it? And he may win that argument. Because I think for Europe, they see the Ukraine war as an existential threat. And his point is not without validity. Okay, if it's your existential threat, why don't you pay? Why should I pay? Why should we pay? You see, so that's not
by the same token that, he could tell India that, hey, look, stabilizing Bangladesh is your problem. Why do we care? And
I think that's exactly what he'll say.
Yeah,
you see,
right?
I think he will say this, and so I think it's not so much that he's going to retreat from the US's role. It's just his notion of how to work with alliances is very different from Biden's or Obama's or Bill Clinton's. And they thought that we want to be the leader of the world, but we want everyone to like us. He said, I don't care if everyone likes you. I'm the leader of the world, then you have to do everything my way. What's the point of being the big boy on the block if I'm not going to project that power not just to my enemies but to my friends as well? Listen, we're run the show, and we're going to say, when we say jump, you say how high. And that is not going to sit well with America's allies, but they got nowhere else to go. And I think that's really how he's going to sort of approach the situation. And whether this is going to have an impact on globalization, if you're talking about the integration of markets, if we're talking about labor markets as well as stuff like RMG, I'm not sure again that will have an impact. I think here there's once again a disconnect. On the one hand, of course, he's all about American jobs, Asia, this, that, whatnot. But every day, everyone also likes their shirts. They like their $8 t-shirts from H&M made in Bangladesh. If you're going to make that t-shirt in America, if you're going to make it in Europe, it's going to cost double. So
and somebody's got to mow their lawns and clean their malls and all of those things, and asking
all of that,
and
same thing. So, and if you look at the global labor market, Bangladeshis we don't send our people to America. We send them to the Middle East. We send them to Malaysia. We send them to Singapore. So I think, as far as I understand, that is not going to shut down anytime soon. So I actually think, and same thing with the garment industry. I moved back to Bangladesh in 2003. For 21 years, I've been hearing about the imminent collapse of the
imminent demise, right?
Imminent demise, and it never happened. So I don't think it's happening this time either. But maybe Shafiq Bhai has a different perspective. I'm not sure.
No, আমি মোটামুটি ফুললি অ্যাগ্রিড উইথ দোজ থিংস। হ্যাঁ, বাংলাদেশ আমেরিকার উপরে অত ডিপেন্ডেন্ট না। আমাদের মেইন যেটা এক্সপোর্ট, যেটা গার্মেন্টস, আমেরিকা উইল বাই ফ্রম বাংলাদেশ, বিকজ পিপল ওয়ালমার্টে জাস্ট মনে হয় যে ইনফ্লেশনে তারা এই $10 টি শার্ট বাই করে বা $10 $15 জিন্স বাই করে অভ্যস্ত হয়ে গেছে। এটা এখন $30 জাম্প করলে এটার ইমিডিয়েট অ্যাঙ্গার পড়বে গভর্নমেন্টের উপরেই। দে ওন্ট গো ফর দ্যাট। আর প্লাস ইমিগ্রেশনটা নিয়ে আমার কথা, আমি তো আমেরিকা এবং কানাডার দোকানেই দেখেছি যে এটা আসলে পার্টিকুলারলি আমেরিকা রানস অন ইমিগ্রেশন। মানে এখানে সব ডিফিকাল্ট কাজ, সব কাজগুলো সবকিছুই করতেছে মোটামুটি ইমিগ্রেন্টরা, পার্টিকুলারলি ল্যাটিন আমেরিকান ইমিগ্রেন্টরা। এখন হেসিয়ানরা আসছে, এটা মানে এদেরকে ম্যাসিভ ভাবে ডিপোর্ট করতে গেলে আমেরিকান ইকোনমিতে যেই শকটা আসবে সেটা চিন্তা করা যায় না। সুতরাং কিছু টিয়ে করার পরে কিছু মানে জেস্টার করবে, কিছু অমানবিক কিছু করবে, কিন্তু এরকম ম্যাসিভ করবে না। মানে আমেরিকা, আমি ইউরোপের কথা জানি না, মানে পার্টিকুলারলি নর্থ আমেরিকার ইকোনমিক প্রসপারিটির পিছনে বড় সবাই তো মানে এলন মাস্ক, টেসলা, ইন্ডিয়ান ইমিগ্রেন্ট এদের কথাই বলে। বাট এট দ্য বটম মানে আমেরিকার ইকোনমিতে যা কিছু, সেই মানে ফুড ট্রাক হতে গিয়ে মানে বাসা বানানো, মানে কনস্ট্রাকশন, এগ্রিকালচার, মানে বিশেষ করে একটু বের হলে দেখ এভরি হার্ড ওয়ার্ক ইজ ডান বাই ইমিগ্রেন্টস। এবং সোজা কথা যে মানে এটা এটা আসলে ন্যাচারালি রিভেঞ্জ একটা, যে ওয়ান্স ইউ বিকাম রিচ ইউ ডোন্ট ওয়ার্ক। এটা ন্যাচারাল রিভেঞ্জ যে যে একটা কান্ট্রি রিচ হয়ে যাওয়ার পর তারা ওয়ার্ক করে না, ইউ হ্যাভ টু ফাইন্ড পিপল হু আর মোর হাংরিয়ার দ্যান ইউ। আমেরিকা এই জন্য লাকি এদিক দিয়ে দে ক্যান ফাইন্ড এ সোর্স অফ লাইক আ মোর হাংরি, মোর ইন্ডাস্ট্রিয়াস পিপল, বিকজ যারা অরিজিনাল আমেরিকান তাদের উপর রিলাই করলে দে ওন্ট বি কম্পিটিটিভ ইন দ্য ওয়ার্ল্ড ইকোনমি। সুতরাং আমি খুব একটা ওয়ারিড নাও ব্যাপারে, কিছু উল্টাপাল্টা জিনিস হবে, বাট আই ডোন্ট থিঙ্ক ওয়ার্ল্ড ইকোনমি ইজ টার্নিং ব্যাক, বিকজ মানুষ কেউ বাচ্চা প্রডিউস করতেছে না, নতুন ওয়ার্কার আসতেছে না। সুতরাং ইমিগ্রেশনটা এটা চলবেই এটা। আর হ্যাঁ, এখন এনিথিং ইয়ের সাথে, ইন্ডিয়ার সাথে যে একটা কথা, যে ট্রাম্প ইলেক্টেড হওয়াতে একটা পার্টিকুলার যেটা ইয়ে হলো যে আইডিওলজিক্যাল যে একটা মেক ওভার, যে ট্রাম্প পার্টিকুলারলি একটা ওয়ার্ল্ড টোটালি একটা রাইট উইং একটা মুভমেন্টকে একটা রিপ্রেজেন্ট করে। ট্রাম্প মোটে একজন ইন্টেলেকচুয়াল না, কিন্তু তার পিছনে যারা বেকার্স আছে, সেই ধরো যে ইলন মাস্ক হতে শুরু করে পিটার থিয়েল বা এমনকি তার যে স্টিফেন মিলার বা যাই হোক, মানে তাদের পিছনে একটা রাইট উইং মুভমেন্ট আছে, যে তারা বলতে গেলে তাদের বিগেস্ট এনিমি হলো যে ওক লিবারালস, মানে যার ওক লিবারালসরা তো। সুতরাং এই রাইট উইং মুভমেন্টটা এদের সাথে আবার গ্লোবালি কানেক্টেড, যে রাশিয়ান রাইট উইং ডিসইনফরমেশন মিডিয়া কিংবা ইন্ডিয়ান রাইট উইং মিডিয়া, মানে এদের সবারই কিছুটা ইনডাইরেক্টলি কানেক্টেড আছে এদের। তো সুতরাং হাউ ওয়ারিড আর ইউ দ্যাট যে গ্লোবালি এই একটা রাইট উইং একটা রিসার্জেন্স, একটা ক্রুয়েলিটি that you don't have to be like a caring anymore. You can be cruel if you are powerful and rich. এই ধরনের একটা রাইট উইং একটা নেটওয়ার্ক গ্লোবালি, how worried are you about that? And like
And I
Bangladesh,
bring all of that back to Bangladesh, right? That like,
yeah,
sort of, and as you said, that like, we are not really all that democratic in our hearts to begin with.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, না আমি মনে করি আসলে this is I don't have a happy answer because আমি মনে করি this is the wave of the future. এইভাবে আমাদের একটু we have to set our stomach এবং মানে and this is the problem. You see, the problem is that you need to create a democratic world order is actually quite difficult because um, there are a lot of disadvantages which it faces, and so you have to really believe in it, and then you have to have that leadership. And if the leadership no longer exists, because you have the countries of like the US, Western Europe, then I don't see it happening because I think it's not organic. I don't think it's not something which has very deep roots in the world. And it's also very unclear that it can provide a much better world, but only insofar as everyone signs up for the program. If you sign up for the program and everyone else does not, then you are handicapping yourself in many ways. So now, what does this mean for Bangladesh? Now, I'm a good old-fashioned liberal Democrat. I strongly believe that democracy is the best way for a nation to organize its affairs, and I think in fact, I believe that the problems we have faced in Bangladesh in the last 52 years have been due to our deficit of democracy. We've had quasi and ostensibly democratic governments here and there, but for the most part, they've largely paid lip service to it. And I feel that had we had a much more truly democratic government in place, things would be much better in Bangladesh. So this is not a trend which I welcome. This is not a trend that I think is necessarily good for Bangladesh. But also, at the end of the day, I can make the counter argument, which is that that maybe there will be greater efficiency. There will be, we always, আমার সবসময় বলি না বাংলাদেশে Singapore model. And I spend a lot of time in Singapore for various reasons, and I have to say, that I think how they of course, it's a very different country. 5 million মানুষ থাকে, life is much easier. And but তারপরে I think a lot of the approach of how they have managed things does make a lot of sense. Of course, what we have in Bangladesh over the last 15 years is all the negative qualities of a Singapore model and none of the positive ones. আমরা পুরো উল্টা করেছি, but I mean, if a more democratic model is out of reach, then maybe a more functional authoritarian model can be more workable for Bangladesh. The problem we faced in the past, the authoritarians in the past have not been Singaporean authoritarians. You see, they have not really delivered much in the way of efficiency. I think in a country like Singapore, you have meritocracy, you have anti-corruption. These are the rule of law. These are the heart and soul of that system. What do you really have going for you, But that said, I think that these are the important things. আমরা যদি rule of law establish করতে পারি, আমরা যদি meritocracy establish করতে পারি, আমরা যদি anti-corruption institute করতে পারি is a governing principle of Bangladesh. These things are perhaps more important than whether we have more democracy or less democracy. I don't know. I mean, then maybe that's just something I tell myself so I can sleep at night. I'm not sure. A fairy tale.
We have crossed the hour mark, so we should probably wrap it up here on that provocative note. Because I have a feeling that we'll come back to this conversation again and again. So thanks, Zafar, for coming to our first show. And
I enjoyed this conversation very much. So you can always rely on me. You see?